Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Sade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Extraordinary Life and Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm Sade Curry, your host. It is a pleasure to be back with you today. So today's topic is a little bit heavy. I'm going to try not to make it as heavy as it could be, but I just ordered Giselle Pellicot's book, A Hymn to Life, off of Amazon, and that really sparked some of the thoughts that I am going to address today. If you're not familiar with her story, Giselle is a woman who lives in France, and her husband, over a period of decades, would drug her and let other men come into their home to have intimate relations with her. To the tune of, I believe, over 50 or 70 occurrences of this, just so insane to imagine that happening over years and years. And then he would record it. And so as I ordered her book, I kind of thought about the series that I've been doing on my new methodology with relationships, where the first port of call is awareness and discernment around relationships. And this tends to apply to relationships where the woman does not feel safe. So this is not every relationship, but if you are having conversations in the world today, you realize, oh my goodness, the relationships where women were not safe. Of course, there's a whole spectrum of a lack of safety, from physical abuse to just verbal abuse to psychological cruelty, gaslighting, financial control, spiritual abuse. So, those are on the heavy side of things, all the way to, neglect or negging, which is one of the newer terms for when a man puts a woman down in order to make her prove herself, to prove that she's not that. So there's a whole spectrum of a lack of safety in intimate relationships. If you listen to this and you're like, if you're comfortable listening to this and you can go through the entire episode and be like, yeah, none of that is happening in my relationship, you're probably good to go. Then there's some of you who are going to listen to this and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is totally my relationship. Yeah, I always knew it. You're probably pretty safe too, because your situational awareness you're pretty spot on. Mostly what I'm saying will validate some of the things you were already thinking and feeling. The people who are most in danger, quote unquote, I don't necessarily mean physical danger, but in danger of not gaining the awareness that they need when you listen to something like this. And there are lots of podcasters and content creators who are talking about these kinds of situations, are the people who say, my goodness, I think that's happening, but it couldn't be. Right? That is the thing I want to address. It is he did that, but what he really meant was this, or that happened, but it wasn't what you're saying. And if you find yourself doing that over and over and over again, then you are the person that this podcast is for, because we're talking about situational awareness and the belief that when your pattern recognition systems are coming online and you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe, or it doesn't feel right, or it just doesn't feel like what you want, your social conditioning and your extreme self-awareness and humility and desire to do the right thing causes you to ignore clear signs, clear signals, and clear, warning signs that not that the thing that's happening right now is the most dangerous thing that could happen to you, but that a pattern of behavior is being established in your intimate relationship, and allowing yourself to see what that could become if nothing changes. And so the people who are most in danger are the ones who dismiss the signs, which makes you less prepared for when the signs grow into something bigger. If you're already aware of the signs and you're already paying attention, it doesn't mean like you do something drastic in the moment. Some people need to do something drastic in the moment because of their lack of safety. Some people don't. Again, this is such a case-by-case situation, but dismissing the signs puts you in the worst situation. It's just like signs of an illness, right? If you are aware of the signs and you're like, oh, I'm seeing this, and you're noting it, even if you haven't done something about it, because of your awareness of the progression of the whatever it is, you're more likely to get help early, right? Or if you're noticing signs and then the signs go away and they never come back, you're like, oh, you're okay. But the people that end up having the worst outcomes medically are the ones who see the signs and keep explaining the signs away and never get the help that they need. So that's what we're talking about today. The title of this episode is You're Not Paranoid. You are not paranoid. So many women look back at their gut instincts and their intuition and the red flags and everything, and they're like, dang it, I thought I was paranoid, and he told me I was paranoid, and everyone around me told me I was paranoid, but I wasn't paranoid. And that's literally my story. You guys have heard it on the podcast. I look back and I was like, oh my God, I was the smartest person in the room. But I was also conditioned to question myself. And that conditioning, religious conditioning, cultural conditioning, societal conditioning by my partner who kept saying, well, you're too sensitive and you're paranoid and this, that, and the other. Like all of those layers of conditioning made it hard for me to be like, and then the thought, this is the thing about being someone who like, you're super self-aware and you're into personal growth and you're like, yeah, you question yourself because you don't want to pretend you're right, is that humility and desire to learn and curiosity gets weaponized against you by people who are lying to you. Anyway, I think I'm getting ahead of myself and ranting instead of following all the things that I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to start from the beginning, right? Think about situations in relationships, and this could be in a romantic relationship, in your marriage, or it could be other relationships, friendships, parents, right? Oh my goodness. I don't think I've really talked much about my childhood. However, if anything set me up for the marriage I was in, it was my childhood, right? And like literally I could illustrate everything we talk about on this podcast with my childhood as well. But there's only so much time to talk about these things. So think about a relationship, or the relationship that you feel has been the most challenging for you. Not a relationship with a child, because that's the one set of relationships that really have different rules apply because a child is dependent upon you for their own survival. So we can't apply these relationships to them. But your adult relationships, right? Your romantic relationships, all of those relationships with adults. So if you were a child and you were or a teenager in a relationship with an adult, someone who was an adult, or you are an adult and you're in a relationship with other adults, those are the relationships I want you to think about. And think about scenarios like this. The first time that person made a joke and it just felt off and you dismissed it. Like, well, okay, they didn't really mean it that way. It really wasn't a big deal. Or they just have a strange sense of humor. Or you saw them get irrationally angry with someone, or you even saw them harm someone, maybe not physically, but harm someone with their words. I remember when my ex-husband described how he got into a fight with a bus conductor in Nigeria, and I was just like, it didn't feel right because, we were educated people, upper middle class. Like, why are you getting into a why are you getting in fisticuffs with a bus conductor, So there was that little, flag that went up in my gut and in my mind. But then, we were in the university campus together. It wasn't like he was getting into fisticuffs with our friends and other people. So, it was just something he told me about that he had done. But those are the signs. Those are the things that get labeled as paranoid or overly sensitive or too picky. But those are the things that you see play out, maybe not in exactly the same way, but you see them play out in a certain way. That situation played out in my marriage with my ex-husband being overly particular about being, quote unquote, respected. No accountability to anybody, anywhere, not at work, not at home, not at church. Nobody could hold him accountable for any of his behaviors because to him that was being disrespected. And the same seed that would get him to be in a situation with the bus conductor causes him to, not be able to hold roles at work because he couldn't get along with people, and caused that marriage to be how it was because then he couldn't get along with people as well. When you are looking at the money and you're like, we're making so much money, where is all the money going? Like, what is happening to the money that I am bringing home, right? That you are, handling and spending, and like, shouldn't we have more in our savings account? Shouldn't we have more in our retirement accounts? Like, what's going on? And then later on you find out that your ex or your husband was gambling the money away, was spending it on his mistress and things like that. But what happens when you bring up those things is that the person, typically in these situations, because these are not people who are honest or accountable or looking out for your well-being, they're more than happy to dismiss it and say you're paranoid or controlling or overly sensitive. That's not the problem. So a lot of women I talk to think that the problem is that this dishonest person who was cheating on them, who was violent, who was gaslighting, who was spending too much money, who was an addict, they think the problem is that this person was lying to them. And I know that that is a problem. So I'm not trying to say that that person's behavior was okay. But the only way you could have safeguarded yourself from that kind of person is by having situational awareness. So because those kinds of people exist in the world, and they continue to exist in the world, it is not useful to see them as the problem. Because otherwise, then we're living in a world where there is a problem that cannot be solved, and therefore you will always be subject and will always be a victim of these kinds of people. So these people exist. What they do is harmful. It is harmful, definitely harmful. However, the fact that the harm exists does not absolve me or other women or people like you and I listening to this from learning how to safeguard ourselves from those people. If you live in a neighborhood where homes get robbed, it is your job to lock your front door, to lock your windows, to get a security system. There's no point in leaving your doors unlocked, windows unlocked, because I should be able to leave my doors unlocked. People shouldn't be robbing other people. That's bad. That's wrong. That you leave everything open. And then when they rob you, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they robbed me. This is terrible. This is why we lock our doors at night. This is why we put the door jam. This is why you have security systems. This is why you do what you need to do. The adult behavior is to safeguard yourself. So that's what this episode is about. It's not about the warning signs of the bad people, the red flags. There's a billion red flags. You cannot memorize enough red flags. This is why people struggle so much. This is why there's so much content on red flags. And women fall for the red flags every time, because you can't minimize enough red flags. If you do not know how to have situational awareness, the red flag will show up as a beige flag next week, and the harm will be the same. So the key here isn't to memorize all the red flags from all of your past exes. The key is to have situational awareness so that it doesn't matter how a red flag comes up disguised. You're like, nah, I don't like this. And not only that, you are willing to experience the discomfort of when you express that this isn't for me, it doesn't feel right. And people are like, oh, you're paranoid, you're too sensitive, you'll be single forever. You're ruining your marriage, you're too negative. All those things, you're like, yeah, but you know what? Still don't like it, not going to do it. That's the key. That's usually where people fall apart. Because they're willing to say, well, I think this is a red flag, but they're also willing to be talked out of it. Because they don't want to be the bad person. They don't want to be mean. They don't want to be judgmental. So let's talk about how are we even at this point where so many women are so afraid of being called paranoid, right? One of the books that I read in the middle of my divorce was Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear. And that helped me so much to understand the situation I was in. And it's given me a lot of situational awareness since then. Like when I went back into the dating world, All of those things were like, oh my God, so helpful. It was a learning process. I had to learn to, dial down the level of trust I gave people and to listen to my own intuition and to listen to my gift of fear. But that book really talked about how fear, when you feel uncomfortable, that's data. That's like information that your nervous system, remember your nervous system is the part of your biology that processes input. So when you see something, if you were walking and you saw a lion coming towards you, that goes into your nervous system. It goes in through your eyes, retina, blah, 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 to your optic nerve, right? So your optic nerve sends that information to your brain. Then your brain is like, lion coming, this is bad. It sends information down through your other nerves. I challenge you to, this is such a fun exercise. Google a picture of the nervous system. Like, we all use the skeleton, like at Halloween, we use the skeleton as like the scary part of the dead body. Listen, if the nervous system comes floating towards you, I guarantee you'll run even faster. That thing looks so weird because with the skeleton, you don't even have the eyes, right? It's just eye sockets. The nervous system includes the eyes. So it's like, it's looking at you. Anyway, so your nervous system, your ear is taking information, your skin, takes in information, your senses. Your nervous system is the part of you that is like making connections with the world that you are in. And when you realize that you're like, when I feel something in my body, when I feel something's off, when I feel sad, when I feel angry, when I feel scared, that is information. That is literally data. The challenge is we have been raised, especially women, to ignore is such a benign word for what we do with the sensory data that we receive as women. It's just so bad. Not only do we see the information coming in, we take it in, our nervous systems tell us this is bad, don't do that. And then we have now been trained. We have gone to boot camp for 20, 30, 40, some of us 50, 60 years to say, okay, if you feel scared and it's a romantic partner, ignore that because you need a partner and you're probably crazy and overly sensitive and scared. And we practice that over and over and over again. If you were raised in a family that, you were told to squash your responses and squash your emotions and be in a relationship at all costs, and that your responses, your nervous system responses are disrespectful to somebody else. Like all those things, if that's the way you've been conditioned, it's like you've been taught to be at war with yourself forever. And so when you think about things like women being, having a lot of stress, women being highly anxious, autoimmune diseases that are linked to this kind of high stress, emotional eating, so many things that are attached to quote unquote women's reactions, hysteria back in the day, is because the social conditioning of women almost globally, right? And of course, there are exceptions and there's some families that do an excellent job of protecting their daughters and helping their children not ignore their nervous systems. But generally, the numbers aren't great in general for women, right? And for the way we handle our intuition. Basically, you are a ninja. You are an expert at talking yourself out of what your body and your brain and your nervous system knows. And so if you feel crazy, and sometimes we're like, oh, I must be paranoid because I do feel crazy. No, it's the other way around. You feel crazy because you're seeing something real and you're spending so much energy talking yourself out of it. And then other people are spending time talking you out of it. Okay? So if you have some time out, Gavin DeBecker's book, it is an old book, 1997. Like this is an old book, but it's still, and there might be updated versions of it or updated. But that's the one I read, and that's what I'm recommending. So as a woman, you're taught to be easygoing, not too sensitive, not too dramatic, even as you're being harmed, to be agreeable, even as you're being harmed. So like, think about the fact that like you're in a relationship, you're being harmed in the relationship, But any response other than, I guess this is okay, is tagged as being terrible, and there are consequences for them. So it becomes this cycle of I'm being harmed, or I think I'm about to be harmed, or I don't like this. You have a reaction, and then the punishment comes for the reaction. The underlying harm is still there, or is still happening, or hasn't been dealt with, but any reaction then receives punishment by people saying things about you, receives punishment by you being isolated, receives punishment by, you being talked out of it. It's a lot. It's a lot. You go to trusted people. I've told the story about how my mentor was like, oh, you're so negative when I talked about the things that were happening in my marriage, only for like less than 2 years later, things just got really, really bad. Right. If you feel confused about your situation and your thoughts about your situation and your intuition versus what's happening versus what you think about it, that is a feature, because then all your energy goes into being confused and stuck. This is why you feel stuck. You can't make decisions. You can't take adult actions because you have been forced into this position of a child who doesn't know what she's thinking, who doesn't know what she's doing. So here's a question to consider. When was the first time you were told or it was implied that you were being overly dramatic, you were being overly sensitive, you might be paranoid? This was hinted at interestingly, as recently as 6 months ago. As recently as 6 months ago, I was having a conversation with someone. They didn't directly use the word paranoid at me, but they used the word paranoid in the conversation, which implied that, well, one might think that this was kind of paranoid, but I've realized that other people have different experiences from me. So, maybe I don't know. And so they did this whole roundabout way to imply that I was being paranoid. And I did this interestingly, as recently as 6 months ago. And I was like, I just do what I do now, which is like, I'm not talking to you again. I don't have time for this, right? That was the last time I had maybe I had one more conversation with that person so that I could end it was a professional relationship. So I could end and just kind of close out the relationship without making much of a fuss. I just kind of move on quietly. That's my modus operandi these days. So how many times have you heard it implied that you're overly sensitive, overly dramatic, maybe paranoid, wrong, confused, crazy? This is an exercise that I want you to take some time to do, to raise awareness. If you just think about one time, you might not realize how much this is happening. And for some of you, you really need to be aware of how much this is happening so you can do something about it, right? It comes up when women feel like they're being too picky, or men imply that they're too picky. Their friends, their mothers tell them they're being too picky, and that's why they're not in a relationship. Versus, they're not in a relationship because they have been smart enough to not choose anyone who would harm them. They haven't found someone that they can confidently and 100% feel comfortable that this person is not harmful and has earned my trust over a period of time. And that's okay, because guess what? The trustworthy men are not the majority in the population. Doesn't matter what anybody says about, well, not all men. Yeah, we know it's not all men, but we're just hoping it's a majority of men, and we're finding that it's not a majority of men. It's not a majority of men that are good for you in a relationship. And that's why dating can take quite a bit of time. I know women get frustrated when it takes time. I'm like, yeah, but you could marry somebody off the internet today. You don't want to, because that person is probably not good for you. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because finding a person that you would want to actually merge lives with requires a high level of safety, compatibility, mutual satisfaction, mutual reciprocity. These are deal breakers in relationships, and not a ton of people know how to give and take that today. And that's okay. You don't have to take it personally. You just stay in the journey for yourself until you find the person who is that person for you. That's all it is. Anyway, so thinking that you're being too picky. A couple of things that I think create that catch-22 for women, where they're like, I don't want to engage in this level of awareness about what's happening. There's a cost of being wrong. So depending on the situation, so say a woman is married, she's got 3 kids, they're all under the age of 10. And then she's married to someone and she starts to feel like things aren't safe, things aren't right, things are happening. But she doesn't want to engage with what she thinks might be happening because, one, if she's wrong, there's a high cost to women for being wrong about their suspicions, even though it's not often that women are wrong about their suspicions. However, if they were, there's a high cost to that, right? Like she would blow up her life, her children's lives would become unstable, her innocent, quote unquote, innocent husband or husband who was then found to be innocent could then decide that he wants to break up the relationship because she accused him of cheating or whatever, and she became controlling, quote unquote, controlling. And then all her friends and then his family, and then now everyone's against her. That's one of the deep fears of women. Like if I'm wrong, then I would have rocked the boat and I would have created this whole big mess and I would have created all these problems and I won't be able to take it back. So listen, it makes sense that you don't want to engage with the reality of what you might be seeing because the world is not kind to women. Even when they're not making mistakes, the world isn't kind to women. Right? Much more if you are making a mistake. And this is why there is an answer to this. You have to be kind to yourself, right? You cannot wait for the world to rally around and be like, oh, we're going to be kind to women and take care of them. The key is for you to be kind to yourself. So I'm just going to give you that little aside. Then women are also afraid of being right. So if you really take a look at what's happening in your marriage, if you really name it for what it is, if you really say, my marriage is abusive, and if I don't do something about it, I might get seriously hurt. I might get seriously hurt physically, financially. My mental health might completely deteriorate. My children's mental health might completely deteriorate. If I'm right, I have to do something about it. And then you have to deal with it. I have to talk to him about it. I have to confront it. I have to tell people the shame of being right about this thing that's happening. I couldn't bear it, is the fear. Like you would have to bear something that you've seen other people handle. And like, you don't want to be that woman. That is it right there. Like you don't. And I remember having this feeling during my divorce of like, oh my, like you were that woman. You were the one that you just knew people were talking about you. You just knew people were pitying you. You heard it in their voices. I heard it in people's voices. The way they would pity me and then they would pity my kids and whatever. It was painful then. Right now, I'm just like, that was just such a waste of energy. It really was such a waste of energy on my part, feeling the shame. And a waste of energy on their part, because I'm like, seriously, is this how you get off? Like, what the heck, right? But anyway, it's really hard to shame me these days. Just really hard out, Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So, if they turn out to be right, they have to do something about it, which is almost like, well, my life, I would have to blow up my life and then I would have to start over. And then I'm not the young 22-year-old I was when I got married. And then my kids will have to deal with it. And what happens is women feel like they're caught. They say a lot of this is subconscious. Like you're caught in this, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I'm just not going to do anything about it. They don't realize that there's a third option where you don't do anything about it and things get really, really bad. And then you have fewer resources to deal with it. And you have less knowledge and you're less aware. And then you get blindsided more and the outcomes are even worse than if you had allowed yourself to look at it. Even if you did nothing about it, educate yourself about it. Work on your emotional resilience, work on your emotional detachment, get some help, get some healing, go to therapy, get support, build a network, build community, all of the things that I teach my clients to do, even if they decide not to leave. If you decide to stay, you're going to need all those things. You're going to need financial resources and independence. You're going to need a community to support you. You're going to need an education in what is happening. What is happening in my life? What is this? There are answers for all those things. You're going to need knowledge on how people have dealt with this and what will work in your situation and what would not work in your situation if you stay. And if you leave, you're going to need financial resources and emotional support and emotional resilience and emotional detachment and an understanding of the court system or the separation system or the financial system. It's the same work. And that's one of the reasons why I've sort of like shifted in what I'm teaching on the podcast, because I'm realizing the same things my dating clients have to do is the same thing my married clients have to do, is the same thing my divorce clients have to do. We need discernment. We need to have like personal authority and self-leadership. We need to know our core values and live in integrity with our core values. We need to understand safe relationships and unsafe relationships. And we need to know how to connect to love in ways that are safe and with people that are safe. And we need to know how to build our own lives independently and build our own emotional resources independently, whether you're in a relationship or not. I just literally from 8 years of doing this work, I was like, oh my God, it's all the same thing. And I just distilled it down to it's the same work. So whether you're dating, if you're dating, you need situational awareness when you're dating. You need to understand, who is this person? What is happening when this person says this? How does that land with me? What is happening inside of me? You need to develop an emotional vocabulary because your nervous system is giving you information. If you are married, your husband may or may not remain the cute, sensitive, sweet boy you met in your last year in college, and he was your college sweetheart. He might not still be that person. He might be. He might not be. How are you going to know? Situational awareness, being willing to see what you see and know what you know. And here's the thing. If your marriage is wonderful, this information is not going to be a problem for you. It really is not a problem. I would be the first person to say this is not a problem. Honey, you're searching and you're reaching so that you can have a problem. Right? But if your husband is truly a good guy and he cares for your well-being and he understands the things that are needed to sustain mental health and physical health and well-being of his spouse and his children, he's not going to be doing things that are harming you. He's just not going to be doing things that are harming you. It just isn't, it's not. Or if he did do something that, was harmful to you and you would feel, well, not necessarily, and you did talk to him about it, he wouldn't come back to you with oh my God, you're crazy. I never did that, right? A guy who comes to you and says, you're crazy. I never did that. That never happened. You're reading it wrong. That's not a guy who understands what you need to be healthy and well. That's not a guy who's looking out for your wellness. Now, some guys are willing to be educated on what it takes for you to be well in the relationship, right? And then you can have that conversation and you can be like, oh yeah, I didn't mean that, but I can see where you would get that. And yeah, I won't say that again, or I won't do that again. No problem. Guess what? You didn't lose anything by engaging with what you were feeling and having the conversation with your partner. And then some of you will engage with what you're feeling. You'll have the conversation with your partner and he will be like, what the heck? And then he will harm you even more. And then you can be like, okay, so I'm gathering data. It's just more data. Anything that happens in your pursuit of integrity and wholeness and a truly loving, connected relationship is data that lets you know whether that is available in your relationship or not. And my encouragement is you should want to know. You should want to know what's really going on in your relationship. You should want to know the potential consequences of that. Right? And some of you are listening to that and you're like, I didn't want to know, but it's like I said earlier, it's if it was a medical situation, and I get not wanting to know, and I've talked about why we don't want to know, but your safest bet is not avoiding what's happening in your relationship. Okay. I think I'm going to stop here for now. Go at this with a lot of self-compassion. Remember, where did this overly trusting, naive, denial-ridden way of engaging with life come from? You didn't decide that. Your parents and your church or spiritual community and the adults in your life, they were supposed to teach you. They were supposed to encourage you to engage with your situational awareness so that you could keep yourself safe, right? So if that wasn't given to you as a young person, that's not your fault. And if that's been reinforced by society, that's not your fault either. But now that you're an adult, now that you get to choose how you think about things, you get to choose how you want to approach life and how you want to engage life. You get to decide, you know what? I want to learn how to have situational awareness. I want to know how to apply it, because there's one thing to know it, but there's another way to know how to apply it in your specific situation. Your specific situation is a specific context, and the things you end up doing, making the best right decision for yourself, is going to be different from what another person might do. But the first step is understanding what's going on. There's a saying, diagnosis is 50% of the cure. You can't cure something if you don't even understand what the problem is. So yeah, situational awareness, understanding your context, understanding your own responses, understanding what your partner does or how your dynamic together is impacting you is you taking responsibility for the experience that you're having on earth. And life is short. So the experience you have can be in your hands. It can be something that you can take charge of, not by controlling other people or changing other people, but becoming aware of what's going on, deciding if that's what you want or not, or don't want, and then making the changes in yourself and in your life and getting the education and taking the steps that you need to create what you want in your life. Okay. Thanks for hanging with me for this ride. I try to keep it light, like on the surface, because I know, just even knowing that Giselle's book is coming in the mail, I'm like, oh Lord, what's going to be in it? And am I going to be able to handle reading it? But, I definitely wanted to support her work. I wanted to, in a sense, stand on the side of, those of us who are fighting these evils in the world. Crazy what's happening in the world, y'all. All right. Thanks for your time and attention. I will see you on the next episode.